You want to know what caused January 6th?
That was entrepreneur turned Republican presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy. I've recently been binge watching his interviews and have been blown away by both his bravery and his unique insight into some of our nation's biggest problems.
Okay, well, since you're getting radical now, let's go through a list of all the other things you're not allowed to say.
In this video, I'm going to discuss two instances where he brilliantly reframes a national issue, the second of which I believe can actually save the country. Welcome back to Shadow Wreckardz, where we believe mainstream media is the disease, independent journalism is the cure. I'm Scott. Let's continue. Now, disclaimer, I don't consider myself a Republican or a Democrat. I guess you could say I'm an independent. I strive to keep an open mind as I digest what candidates from each party have to say. Before I get into these particular reframes, I'd like to take a moment to discuss what I mean by a reframe so that we're all operating from the same definition. A frame is the accepted context within which a mental exercise occurs. It's basically an agreed upon set of assumptions. It provides the boundaries for that mental exercise. Now, that exercise can be an individual pondering an idea. It could be a conversation about a particular topic. It can be an individual or group effort to enhance understanding, solve a problem, or achieve a particular result. The boundaries of the frame will have a powerful limiting impact on where the mental exercise can go. Now, for psychological reasons that I won't attempt to explain, I actually don't think I could, the frame is often accepted with very little questioning, especially if it is based on widely held beliefs, in other words, apparent consensus, or has been presented by a perceived authority. For example, boss walks into the meeting and says, "We know we can't reach this 6-week deadline working 40 hours a week. I want you all to map out a strategy for how we can achieve our objective." Everyone in the meeting, of course, nods their head and gets to work. The frame has been set. And because this person is a perceived authority figure, it's probably going to be accepted by all. I would predict that every proposed strategy will involve increasing work hours. Now, is it possible to achieve the results working normal hours? Let's suppose it is, but that option is not likely to be considered once the imposed frame has been accepted. When you become aware of this concept, you'll notice these frames everywhere. Many are self-imposed. Countless others are imposed by external authority figures or the perception of consensus. I would argue that the most destructive of these come to us from the mainstream media, which is kind of why I created this channel. Challenging the frame is often called thinking outside of the box, and it could lead to better solutions than anyone thought was possible. Another equally effective approach is to change the box. In other words, reframe the problem. From what I've observed, Vivek Ramaswamy is a master at this. Now, he's successfully created several billion-dollar companies, so maybe this shouldn't be such a big surprise. But I'm going to show you two examples of this, the second of which I believe can actually save the country.
Maybe January 6th, while appalling on one level, maybe it was not an insurrection.
So let me talk about, I haven't talked about this much in the campaign. I'll be very honest with you. You want to know what caused January 6th? There's such a temptation to say that there's one man whose name is unspeakable. We can't.
No, first of all, it's QAnon.
It's QAnon. It's QAnon.
So here they go back and forth a bit and touch on the current mainstream frame. That is, that the breaching of the Capitol was solely caused by the incitement of Donald Trump and or the QAnon phenomenon. That's the frame that's been thrust upon us with great repetition.
You want to know what caused January 6th? Is pervasive censorship in this country in the lead up to January 6th. You tell people in this country they cannot speak, that is when they scream. You tell people they cannot scream, that is when they tear things down. And so the reality is, we were told that you could not question where the virus came from when we all knew it came from a lab in Wuhan, which now they admit. We were told that you could not send a private message to someone on the eve of an election that Hunter Biden's laptop story was actually a true story worth considering before an election. You were systematically suppressed. So think about this. You told you had to be locked down, had to take a vaccine that was mandated and forced down your throat, stay locked down in your home while Antifa and BLM roam and burn the streets of this country. So that's the lead up of 1 full year of telling people you have to shut up, sit down, and do as you're told. And then you tell them, okay, there's an election where you didn't get the information that you needed, such as the Hunter Biden laptop story being real and suppressed. That's what caused January 6th, is a cycle of censorship in this country. And until we look ourselves in the mirror and admit truth on that, we will not move forward as a country.
Why is this so important? Well, a significant percentage of the country have bought the mainstream narrative that the only people who think the 2020 election was questionable are crazed Donald Trump fanatics and or QAnon devotees. I can tell you from my experience that that is far from the truth. Now, I'm not going to get into my entire voting record, but I will acknowledge that I voted for Barack Obama twice. That being said, I also voted for Donald Trump. I thought he was the better of the two options. So you can see I'm relatively independent. I know many people personally who are in the same boat. Far from Donald Trump fanatics, and certainly not QAnon devotees, but who had serious reservations about the legitimacy of the 2020 election. Anyone willing to recognize that that's a reasonable viewpoint will necessarily see the events that took place on January 6th in a different light. What were the intentions of the thousands of protesters who traveled to Washington, D.C. on that fateful day? Was it to destroy our democracy? Or was it to rescue it? Now, the tiny fraction of protesters who took part in the Capitol riot were clearly in the wrong, and I believe exercised extremely bad judgment. But they represented a tiny fraction of the larger group of protesters. Until the majority of Americans recognize and accept that, we can't take the necessary steps to restore faith in our elections. Now, they're being told there are no steps to take because it's only crazy people who saw any issues. I can assert that that is completely untrue. And without widespread faith in the election process, democracy is unsustainable. Now, the mainstream frame, a very destructive frame from my perspective, is that to preserve our democracy, we need more censorship, more suppression, and more punitive measures to dissuade dissent. Now, I agree with Vivek here. That will only cause the problem to fester and worsen. So according to everything I've seen thus far, he strongly supports the First Amendment. But can he walk his talk? He was tested at a recent event when disrupted by an angry heckler. Let's see what happened.
We're done teaching our troops. Protect our women. Amen. Protect our Amen. And I believe that you know what? The number of rapes that are actually reported in the U.S. military. Let her speak. We'll give her. Let me get you to finish what you have to say. Can I just say one thing? I want to give her a chance to speak. You want to come back here? You can say something to me. It's okay. Come back. Come on back. It's okay. Come on up. It's okay. You can ask me a question, and then I will answer. Do you want to ask me a question?
Yes.
You can do that.
If somebody non-consensually rapes me, I'm not having their child. It is my choice. It's my body. I'm already raising a kid that somebody implanted in me and doesn't take care of. The system does nothing for the single mother. There's no child support, and nobody goes after them. I've been raising a child by myself for 8 years. My name is Kayla Crest.
And are you a mother?
I am a mother.
Okay, thank you.
And my kid is successful, and I don't want to be frowned upon. I don't want to be put down because I'm a single mother. My kid is healthy, happy, and successful.
Thank you, Kayla. And I want to say you're doing one of the most important things as a mother raising more children in this world. Even if we have our disagreements, I want to say thank you for that. So thank you. And part of what it means to live in this country is we have free speech. We get to speak our minds openly, even if we all don't agree on it. So let's actually applaud her for the courage. Come into a room and ask her a question, even though we don't agree.
So impressive, his handling of this situation. That's the kind of person who can unify. Let's move on to that second reframe. Not as provocative as the first, but certainly as important.
It's not going to hurt you.
So what? Okay, so it's so interesting. So you And I think the intro of you described some of it, but you're coming from a completely different world. It's not like you were mayor, state legislator. You're coming from business and technology and biotech. So what have you learned? Like, how have your views changed since you immersed yourself in crowds of voters and started listening to people?
Yeah, so I think my views have changed in part by my belief that we're not as divided as they make it out to be.
Now here again, with Tucker's help, Vivek outlines the frame he's about to challenge.
One of the things I've been convinced of, I've changed my mind on, is that I don't think we're nearly as divided as we're taught to believe. But I went to the south side of Chicago. It's one of the places it's not really where the political advisors would tell you to go if you're in a Republican primary. I went to Kensington and downtown in the inner city of Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia. And I'll tell you, the people in those rooms, especially on the south side of Chicago, where they're converting South Shore High School into an encampment for migrants who they're spending $7,000 per person per month on, this is the supposedly far left, nearly entirely black, Democratic voting bloc. And I have never heard more eloquent cases for securing the border and actually prioritizing the interests of Americans than I heard in that room.
What did they say?
They said, what about us?
Yeah.
Was actually the right way to say that. And it came out in many ways where, look, we are Christians. We believe in treating these people humanely. But it's not right that they're spending $7,000 a month and getting baby formula when I couldn't find baby formula a year ago. I can't buy sneakers for my kids. They're providing sneakers for those kids. How does that work? How is that advancing my interest? And actually, many of them were asking me, as though I was on the side of it, of why on earth we're sending billions of dollars to Ukraine. So it was interesting to me that the traditional partisan boundaries as drawn are really sort of retrofitted. We're sort of shoehorning an old structure.
Here, he further refines the frame he's about to attack, that the division is partisan in nature.
We're sort of shoehorned the modern truth into sort of an antiquated view where I don't think the dividing line in our country is between Republicans and Democrats right now. I think it is between those of us who are pro-American, who believe in the ideals of this country, who will not apologize for those ideals, who will stand up and sacrifice for those ideals, and those of us who are, and it exists in this country, I mean, the Vice President's a great embodiment of this, anti-American. Those who wish to apologize for a nation founded on our ideals.
Extremely powerful. The divide isn't based on political party like we're frequently told, but between those who are pro-American and those who are anti-American. And by that, he's talking about American ideals.
But if you divide it up that way, it is not 50-50 anymore. It's not even close. It's easily 80-20 in our favor, and half the 20 are people younger than me who never learned what those ideals were in the first place. We're going to bring them along too. I don't even talk about Republicans that much anymore. I try not to use the word. Not because it's a bad word, but because it doesn't mean anything. Right? If half the Republican, 3/4 of the Republican Party's got the same policy as Biden on the most important foreign policy matter of our time, and if much of the Democratic Party, or at least people on the south side of Chicago, believe in using the military on the southern border and putting the interests of Americans first, I'm not sure those labels are doing much for us now.
Now, this really resonates with me because I see it playing out every day. People get so caught up in their perceived political identity that they forget to double check if the values they believe in are still being represented by the elected officials of that party.
Identity can be confining. Right? The left does this masterfully. You're black, therefore you can't achieve something. You're a woman, therefore you can't achieve something. Identity is confining. You can be imprisoned in the identities that you inherit. And I just want to be careful that we learn from the left, or learn including what not to do, to be confined and imprisoned by our own identity of what it means to be Republican. Let's just let that word go and instead ask the question of what it actually means to be an American today. That's the question of our time.
That is the question we have to answer if we want to have any hope of continuing our success as a nation.
There are certain ideals that we fought a revolution for in this country. Self-governance over aristocracy, sovereignty as a nation, free speech, meritocracy. that you get ahead in this country, not on the color of your skin, but on the content of your character and contributions. That's what it means to be an American. That's what we're running to. And honest to God, Tucker, I think that if we do this right, if we actually prioritize our vision, what we stand for, I think it's going to be a landslide election for I'm not going to say a Republican candidate, a pro-American candidate in this race.
Really love the way he wraps it up there. Is he right that 80% of the country agrees on those basic principles? I don't know, but I'm certain that it's far greater than 50%. If we can get those who do to ignore the toxic frames of the mainstream media, we can get this country back on the right track. That is how I see it, my friends. Thanks for sticking with me. Please leave a comment. I'd love to hear your perspective. Hit that like button if you've enjoyed the content. Subscribe to the channel for more. See you soon.